Jonathan Blake, a successful entrepreneur and tech industry leader, had built his empire from scratch. His life seemed flawless: a thriving company, a luxurious lifestyle, and a wife, Emily, who had always been his anchor during turbulent times. Yet, Jonathan's pride and relentless ambition led him down a destructive path, causing a bitter separation from Emily. The divorce left both of them emotionally scarred, but Emily had an even greater burden to bear. She was pregnant, and Jonathan had no idea. One evening, Jonathan found himself in a high-end restaurant, surrounded by soft candlelight and the soothing melody of a pianist playing in the background. The atmosphere was as polished and refined as the image Jonathan had cultivated for himself. He was celebrating a lucrative business deal with Chloe, his charming and vivacious business partner. As Chloe laughed and toasted to their success, Jonathan forced a smile, but inside, he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. As Chloe animatedly discussed their upcoming trip to Milan, Jonathan's gaze wandered, and something, or someone, caught his eye. Behind the counter, a waitress with her hair tied back and a worn apron around her waist moved with quiet determination. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized her, Emily. But it wasn't just her presence that shook him, it was the unmistakable curve of her stomach. Emily was pregnant. Jonathan froze, his mind racing. Memories of their time together flooded back, but the sight of her now, tired yet resolute, made him realize how far apart they had drifted. Her face, though marked with exhaustion, carried a strength he hadn't seen before. She seemed like a completely different person, someone who had endured hardships and come out stronger. Chloe noticed his distraction and frowned. "Jonathan, are you all right?" she asked, her tone laced with concern. "Yes," he replied, his voice strained. "I thought I saw someone I used to know." Unable to focus, Jonathan excused himself and approached the counter where Emily was working. As he drew closer, he noticed how she avoided his gaze, clearly uncomfortable with his presence. "Emily," he called softly, his voice a mix of regret and urgency. "Can we talk?" Emily didn't stop moving, her hands busy cleaning the counter. "I'm working, Jonathan. This isn't the time or place." He glanced at her swollen belly and felt a pang of guilt. "Is it?" he began, but she cut him off. "It's none of your business," she said firmly, finally meeting his eyes. There was fire in her gaze, a mix of pain, anger, and defiance. "You lost the right to ask anything about my life the moment you walked away." Before Jonathan could respond, a customer called for Emily, and she took the opportunity to walk away, leaving him standing there, stunned and full of questions. Back at his penthouse, Jonathan couldn't shake the image of Emily from his mind. The sight of her working tirelessly while carrying a child haunted him. He reached for his phone and called his trusted friend and lawyer, Daniel. "I need your help," Jonathan said, his voice tight with emotion. "I saw Emily tonight. She's pregnant, and I think it might be mine." Daniel hesitated. "Jonathan, are you ready for what you might find out? This could be complicated." "I have to know," Jonathan insisted. "I can't keep pretending like none of this matters." Meanwhile, Emily sat on a bench outside the restaurant, cradling her belly. Her colleague and friend, Sarah, approached with 2 cups of tea. "You okay?" Sarah asked, sitting beside her. "I'm fine," Emily replied, though her voice wavered. "It's just Jonathan showed up tonight." Sarah's eyes widened. "The Jonathan? The one you never talk about?" Emily nodded. He saw me, and now he wants answers. But I don't know if I can let him back into my life, let alone into the baby's." Sarah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Whatever you decide, just remember you don't owe him anything. You've come this far on your own, and you'll keep going no matter what." Over the next few days, Jonathan couldn't concentrate. His office, usually a place of focus and control, felt suffocating. The thought of Emily and the possibility of fatherhood consumed him. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. Finally, he sent her a message. "Emily, I know I've hurt you, and I have no right to ask, but I need to talk to you. I want to understand everything. Please let me meet you anytime, any place. I'll respect your decision, whatever it is." Emily hesitated for hours before replying. "Tomorrow at the park near the restaurant. 3 p.m. Don't be late." The next day, Jonathan arrived early, his heart pounding. When Emily approached, he stood, feeling a mixture of hope and dread. She sat across from him, arms crossed, her expression guarded. "I came because I want closure," she said. "Say what you need to say, but don't expect me to forgive you." Jonathan nodded, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Emily. For everything, for walking away, for the pain I caused. I was selfish and blind, and I see that now. I want to be better, for you and for our child." Emily's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "Words won't fix this, Jonathan. If you want to be part of this baby's life, you'll have to prove it with actions." "I will," he promised, his voice filled with determination. "I don't deserve your trust, but I'll do whatever it takes to earn it." Emily stood, her expression unreadable. "We'll see, Jonathan. But don't let me down again." As she walked away, Jonathan felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, he was ready to fight, not for a deal or a title, but for the family he had almost lost. The crisp autumn breeze swept through the park as Jonathan Blake sat alone on a wooden bench. His mind replayed every word of his recent conversation with Emily, every sharp look she had given him. Her final words echoed in his head, "Don't let me down again." It wasn't just a plea, it was a challenge, a test of whether he could become the man she once believed he could be. For years, Jonathan had lived his life consumed by ambition and pride, brushing off the consequences of his actions like dust on a polished suit. But seeing Emily again, with her swollen belly and unwavering strength, had awakened something he hadn't felt in years: accountability. He had walked away from her at her most vulnerable, but now, faced with the reality of fatherhood, he realized there was no running away from his mistakes. As the weeks passed, Jonathan took steps he once would have scoffed at. He started therapy, a humbling yet necessary decision to confront his flaws and learn to let go of the toxic patterns that had defined his life. Each session peeled back the layers of his ego, forcing him to confront the pain he had caused not just Emily but himself. He had pushed away the only person who truly cared for him, all in the name of power and control. Meanwhile, Emily continued her quiet battle, preparing for the arrival of her baby while balancing the exhaustion of her final trimester. Despite her resolve to handle things alone, Jonathan's actions began to surprise her. Instead of invading her space, he offered practical help, paying off her medical bills, leaving baby essentials at her doorstep, and sending thoughtful notes without demanding anything in return. Though hesitant to accept his support, Emily couldn't ignore the sincerity behind his gestures. One rainy evening, Emily received a message from Amanda, her closest friend at the restaurant. "Jonathan's here again. He's just sitting outside, watching the rain. Should I tell him to leave? Emily sighed, conflicted. For weeks, she had tried to harden her heart against him, to remind herself of all the ways he had failed her. But something about his persistence, his willingness to simply be present without imposing, softened her anger. No, she replied. Let him stay. Jonathan remained outside for hours, drenched but unmoving. It was as if he was silently proving that he was willing to endure even a fraction of the discomfort Emily had faced during their time apart. When she finally stepped outside, umbrella in hand, Jonathan looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and regret. Why are you doing this? Emily asked, her voice a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. Jonathan stood, water dripping from his coat. Because I need to be better. Not for me, but for you and our child. I don't expect forgiveness, but I can't walk away from this again. Emily searched his face for signs of deception, but found only raw honesty. She nodded slowly. Then prove it, Jonathan. Day by day, show me you've changed. Actions, not words. Months later, as winter gave way to spring, Emily went into labor. Jonathan was by her side the entire time, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering words of encouragement she never thought she'd hear from him. When their son, Noah, was born, Jonathan's tears fell freely as he cradled the tiny, fragile life in his arms. Hi, little one, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm your dad. And I promise I'll do everything to be the man you deserve. Emily watched him from the hospital bed, her heart conflicted. For the first time, she saw the Jonathan she had fallen in love with, the man who once believed in building something meaningful together. Though the pain of their past hadn't fully faded, she felt a small glimmer of hope. The following weeks were transformative. Jonathan became an active presence in Noah's life, changing diapers, staying up during sleepless nights, and learning to juggle work and fatherhood. For the first time, his priorities shifted away from his career and toward something far more fulfilling, his family. Emily remained cautious, but over time, her walls began to crack. Jonathan's consistent efforts and humility showed her that he wasn't the same man who had once betrayed her trust. Slowly, she began to let him in, not fully, but enough to give him a chance. One evening, as they sat together watching Noah sleep, Jonathan turned to Emily. Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worth it. Emily looked at him, her heart full of mixed emotions. It's not about proving anything, Jonathan. It's about being here, every day, for Noah and for me. If you can do that, we'll figure out the rest. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of their small family, Jonathan realized that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a better future. Together, they began to write a new chapter, one filled with patience, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead.